On the morning of July 2, 1937, as the sun began to rise over the Pacific Ocean, Amelia Earhart, together with navigator Fred Noonan, departed from Lae Airport in Papua New Guinea aboard the Electra 10A aircraft, aiming to reach Howland Island in the middle of the North Pacific. After months of preparation and a journey spanning thousands of kilometers, this flight was meant to write their names in golden letters in history. Their goal was to complete a long 6,700 kilometers flight from Lae Airport to Hawaii. However, this journey would become the first step in a story that made history, turned into one of the greatest mysteries of all time. As Amelia Earhart approached the Howland Island with her assistant Fred Noonan that morning, they could not see the island. Although they sent multiple radio transmissions to determine their position, they received no response. While Earhart messages were successfully transmitted to the tower, she could not hear any replies. As their fuel dwindled, miscalculation and error began to place them in grave danger. Earhart was an experienced pilot with thousands of kilometers of flight history. By their calculations, they should have been over the island. Instead, there was only the vast emptiness of the Pacific and an eerie silence. Their inability to locate the island or communicate effectively turned into a historical mystery, leaving them to vanish into the now. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on July 24, 1897 in Kansas, United States. With her adventurous spirit, she made important decisions that would radically change her life, following a destiny written in the skies, breaking societal norms, and pushing boundaries. In 1917, she trained as a nursing assistant for the American Red Cross to help wounded soldiers in the US Navy and volunteered at Spadina Military Hospital. During this period, she developed a growing passion for aviation, inspired by the stories of injured military pilots. In 1921, Earhart began taking flying lessons, marking the start of her aviation career. Her first instructor was Netta Snook, one of the few female pilots of the time. That same year, she took a major step toward achieving her personal flying goals by purchasing her first airplane. This bright yellow biplane, a Kenner Acer, was named Canary. With the Canary, she conducted numerous short-distance flights, laying the foundation for her aviation career. In 1923, Earhart became the 16th woman to receive a pilot license from the FAI. During this time, she began participating in small-scale exhibition flight and gained experience flying various routes across the United States. In 1928, she accompanied the captain pilot on a transatlantic flight, bringing her into the spotlight in the United States. As a passenger on a plane flown by Wilmer Stultz and co-pilots Louis Gordon, she was in the air for only a few minutes. Upon landing, she said, "Wilmer did all the flying. I was just baggage on this trip. Maybe someday I fly solo." These words reflected her deep passion for aviation. Although she flew as a passenger aboard the Fokker F-7 aircraft Friendship, this flight earned her international recognition. Earhart, however, inspired to achieve something greater. She wanted to fly solo. Her ultimate dream was to circumnavigate the globe by airplane. In 1932, she took the first step by acquiring a single-engine Lockheed Vega 5B aircraft. Earhart planned to fly from the Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, Canada across the Atlantic Ocean. With an average range of 4,000 kilometers, the plane was capable of making the journey. Norwegian aviator Bernt Bolchen assisted in the preparations for the flight. Once everything was ready, Earhart took off from Harbor Grace and began her transatlantic journey. She calculated the weather conditions, and everything appeared to be on track. Earhart started a long solo flight across the North Atlantic, but hours into the flight, things began to go wrong. She encountered unforeseen challenges during the plane's 16-hour flight. Strong winds began damaging the plane's technical components. 5 hours into the flight, before even reaching the halfway point across the Atlantic, the exhaust manifold cracked. After approximately 10 hours of flying, fuel began leaking due to a faulty gauge. Earhart quickly altered her course and diverted the plane toward Northern Ireland. After 15 grueling hours in the air, she made an emergency landing in a field near Londonderry. When a local farmer approached and asked where she had come from, she replied, "America." This perilous and exhausting flight was a first in her career and earned an immense respect. Earhart was awarded a Medal of Honor by the US Congress, the French government, and President Herbert Hoover for her bravery. Yet, Earhart's ultimate goal was to fly around the world. Had she succeeded, she would have become the first woman to achieve such a feat. By this time, she had already crossed the Atlantic Ocean multiple times and completed the numerous flights across the Americas. However, the flight range of the aircraft at the time was not sufficient. The planes had an average range of 4,000 kilometers and were usually equipped with 150 HP engines, reaching speeds of up to 900 kilometers per hour. Earhart's plan for a world tour was ambitious. The low range and insufficient speed of the aircraft were not adequate for the mission. Consequently, in early 1936, the Lockheed Aircraft Company collaborated with the University of the Purdue to establish the Aviation Research Fund in Amelia Earhart's name, financing a $50,000 fund for the Lockheed Electra 10A aircraft. This plane featured twin wings and 9-cylinder radial engines, each producing 600 HP, making it a 1200 HP aircraft, a significant feat at the time. Additionally, the plane could now reach a speed of 285 km per hour. This high HP also meant increased fuel consumption and the limited range. To address this issue, in July 1936, Lockheed Aircraft Company equipped the Lockheed Electra 10A with extra fuel tanks. For this flight, Earhart needed a navigator. Although she was an excellent aviator, she lacked sufficient training in coordinate calculation and radio adjustments. Earhart selected Harry Manning as her navigator. Manning was the captain of the President Roosevelt's ship at the time, but he was also a pilot and a skilled radio operator who was proficient in Morse code. Under normal circumstances, Earhart would embark on the journey with just a single navigator and radio operator. However, during a test flight a few nights before the planned journey, Earhart discovered that Manning had calculated their position with a margin of error of 48 kilometers. While this was an acceptable deviation, Earhart decided to recruit a second radio operator for additional safety. Fred Noonan was chosen for the role. Noonan was a skilled navigator with expertise in celestial navigation, using the position of start to calculate coordinates. With her team complete, Earhart was ready to begin the world tour with confidence. On March 17, 1937, Earhart and her team embarked on the first leg of the world tour, flying from Auckland to Honolulu. However, during this flight, they encountered a major accident that damaged the plane, though the crew was unharmed. During takeoff, the plane's pre-landing gear unexpectedly collapsed, breaking the propellers and causing significant damage to the wings. As the plane slid on the wings along the runway and drifted for a while, it sustained such severe damage that it became unusable. Following this, when the aircraft was sent for repairs, Manning made a critical decision and left the team. After the plane was repaired, navigator Noonan reversed the plane's world flight route. Instead of flying west to east as originally intended, they decided to fly east to west due to climatic changes and strong headwinds. The journey began with Earhart and Noonan flying to Africa with South America, then proceeding to India, Southeast Asia, and finally reaching Lae, a small city in Papua New Guinea. Following an equatorial route as closely as possible, Earhart was now preparing for the final leg of the world tour, but Earhart was very uneasy. For the last flight, they needed to cross the West Pacific Ocean, covering a massive distance of 11,000 kilometers to reach the United States. The enormity of the Pacific Ocean is such that it comprises nearly an entire hemisphere of the Earth, an almost unimaginable distance. If Earhart, having successfully completed the initial 35,000 kilometers of tour, could finish the final 11,000 kilometers flights, she would make history. But there was a problem. Despite the extra fuel tanks on the plane, the massive 11,000 kilometers stretch was still beyond its range in a single flight. To solve this, they identified Hawaii as the first potential refueling stop. However, even Hawaii was 6,770 kilometers away, a distance the plane was barely capable of covering. After some research, Howland Island was deemed the most suitable refueling spot. The island was so small and uninhabited at the time that it lacked even an airstrip. Recognizing the importance of this endeavor for boosting the United States' international prestige, President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved Earhart's request for funds to construct a runway on the island. Within weeks, a runway was built, funded by the government. The big day arrived. On July 2, 1937, at 10 a.m. local time, Earhart and navigator Noonan prepared for takeoff. The planned flight was expected to last 20 hours. Accounting for the 2-hour time difference between Lae and Howland, the plane was expected to arrive on Howland Island the following day. To ensure accurate positioning during the flight, the US Coast Guard cutter Itasca was deployed near Howland Island. This ship could send blank radio frequencies with voice messages and release black smoke visible on the horizon to help with the aircraft. For this leg of the journey, the plane was loaded with 1100 gallons, approximately 4200 liters of gasoline, the fuels it had ever been. Previous flights had not required maximum fuel capacity. Due to the heavy load, the plane barely lifted off the runway, taking off 50 meters past the runway's end. Earhart reported that the Itasca ship 3 hours after departure that day were flying at 10,000 feet. But due to dense fog clouds, they would descend at a lower altitude. The Itasca ship received the message and confirmed it. However, Earhart and Noonan did not hear the response. 2 hours later, at 5 a.m., Earhart reported that they were flying at 700 feet. By this time, the plane had burned enough fuel to reach its maximum speed. The flight was trouble-free. Earhart and navigator Noonan were enjoying an interrupted and smooth experience. The lack of response from the ship didn't make them think it could be a problem. The next day at 6:14 in the morning, Earhart sent a message to her ship, asking it to transmit the RDF signal to help find their direction. RDF, or Radio Direction Finder, was a primitive system used by mariners and aviators to determine direction. A radio transmitter would send a signal within a specific frequency band, and the receiver would identify the direction based on the silent areas around the signal. This silence allowed the aircraft to pinpoint its target direction. That was exactly what Earhart was attempting to achieve during her flight. Although RFD technology was new at the time, it was widely known and actively used by experienced sailors and pilots. However, this method was only usable within the low frequency band, not the high frequency band that Earhart was trying to use. Her lack of expertise on this issue led her to attempt direction finding with high frequency signals during the flight. High frequency signals could be propagated between the sea and the ionosphere, making them useful for long-distance voice communications, but unsuitable for pinpointing direction. What Earhart needed to do was use the low-frequency band for direction finding while restoring the high-frequency band for voice communication. Attempting to locate a high-frequency signal would have been futile, as the signal would bounce repeatedly between the water in the ionosphere. In contrast, a low-frequency signal, absorbed between the water in the ionosphere, would allow clear identification of direction. However, neither Earhart nor her team noticed before the flight that the aircraft antenna for detecting signal had been damaged during a previous unsuccessful trial. As a result, while they could transmit signals, they were unable to receive any from the other side. The next morning, around 7 o'clock, Earhart sent another radio message to Itasca ship. Our fuel level is decreasing. I think we are approaching the targets, but we cannot fully determine our location. The ship's crew heard this message, but they were unsure whether Earhart could hear them. Itasca increased the strength of its radio signals, but Earhart still couldn't receive them. By the time she realized this, it was too late. The peaceful and smooth flight they had experienced earlier had now turned into a dire situation. Earhart frequently glanced at the fuel gauge panel as the fuel level dropped rapidly. Fred Noonan, meanwhile, tried to pinpoint their location using maps, but the signal from the ship was growing weaker. The aircraft's radio relied on an external battery source, as integrated systems weren't yet available for planes of that era. By 8 o'clock, the atmosphere had become tense. Noonan calculated their position and shoved the map to Earhart. Earhart then sent another message to the ship. We must be near Howland's Island, but we can't see it. Please respond. She was so panicked. Because of this panic, Earhart asked to switch to the 7500 MHz band, a move suggested by the inexperienced navigator beside her. She failed to realize that his mistake would cost them their lives. The Itasca crew quickly adjusted to the 7500 MHz band, releasing a large cloud of smoke into the sky to signal their position. This was meant to help the plane locate the ship. However, the ship's crew was confused by Earhart's actions. Despite increasing the signal frequency, they still couldn't establish clear communication with the plane. Earhart, receiving a signal amidst the long radio silence, mistakenly believed it would save itself, but she still couldn't communicate properly. Turning the plane to align with the signal direction, the frequency would cut out, leaving only silence. Using a high-frequency signal has scattered the transmission, making it impossible to determine the target direction. Had Earhart recast a signal between 150 or 500 MHz, she would have received the necessary silence to identify the correct direction. At 8:43, Earhart sent her final radio message. We must be on the island, but we can't see ship. We started circling. Our fuel is nearly gone. Please respond. This message led Itasca crew to believe the plane was near Howland Island. They did everything they could, but no matter their efforts, they couldn't determine the aircraft's direction. Minutes later, the radio fell silent. The Itasca crew searched the sky for the sign of the aircraft, but they saw nothing, not even the smoke signals rising from the ship. Uncertainty now dominated the Pacific Ocean. As the sun set, Earhart and Noonan's fate was sealed in the depths of the Pacific. What they had spent years planning and attempting to achieve ended in tragedy. Earhart's dream of circumnavigating the globe and proving that a woman could achieve such a feat had turned into an unimaginable ending. The boundless waters of the Pacific swallowed their dreams, leaving only uncertainty. Their final radio transmissions reflected the desperate hope that the cruel reality was inescapable. Earhart, a woman of vision and determination, had hoped to redefine boundaries, but the cruel nature of life proved that not everyone's path is the same. 1 hour after the incident, the Itasca ship conducted a small-scale unsuccessful search near Howland's Island. When Itasca's radio reports were examined, it was determined that the disappearance was due to a combination of technical failures and a lack of expertise. Yes, Earhart's knowledge of radio operations was inadequate. Her only training had been a brief introduction from an airline company officer. Furthermore, flight reported from Leigh Airport, where they had taken off, showed that Earhart had tested the radio before departure, but the damaged antenna had prevented proper communication. Earhart had relied solely on their calculation to find the island. Another report revealed that Itasca had sent Morse code signals to the plane, which Earhart had received, but neither she nor her navigator could interpret them due to their lack of knowledge. Although Itasca made every effort to establish communication, Earhart's aircrafts never received their voice signals. The antenna failure, overlooked before the flight, was the primary reason Earhart couldn't use the radio direction finder. Although the plane could still support Morse communication, their lack of knowledge proved fatal. Earhart's errors during trial flights had raised concerns among her team. Manning, a highly experienced pilot and ship captain, could read and interpret Morse code fluently. He knew Earhart was heading for disaster but chose not to warn her, perhaps to preserve her hopper reputation. Had Manning not left the crew after an early trial, this disaster might never have occurred. Days later, on July 5th, the US Navy launched a massive search and rescue operation involving numerous ships and aircraft. The operation cost $4 million at the time, equivalent to $9 million today. Nearby islands were searched, as it was believed that Earhart, a skilled pilot, could have landed the plane on water and survived. However, neither Earhart, nor Noonan, nor the plane were ever found. The disappearance remains one of the greatest aviation mysteries in history. I hope you enjoyed my video. In this video, I discussed one of history's most tragic disappearances. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to support my research and see more videos. I'm Ahmet. See you next time.